Have you ever walked into a place and felt, without anyone needing to say a word, that you weren't welcome there? That strange feeling of gazes that measure, judge, and decide who you are before you even open your mouth? Now imagine this happening in a high-end private medical center where everything shines, everything seems perfect, except the way people are treated. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover may surprise you more than you imagine. She walks through the glass door automatically, her steps firm but silent. The atmosphere is sophisticated, cold, too organized to seem human. The smell of cleanliness, the low sound of the air conditioning, and the coming and going of well-dressed people create an atmosphere where status speaks louder than words. The black woman observes everything attentively, while feeling something she knows all too well, the weight of not being taken seriously. The reception doesn't greet her immediately. Their eyes pass over her too quickly, as if her presence were a mistake in the system. Have you ever experienced this? As she waits, she notices veiled whispers, raised eyebrows, that silent judgment hidden behind polite smiles. Nothing explicit, nothing that can be easily pointed out, but everything there conveys the same cruel message. You don't belong here. It's a subtle, yet real exclusion, the kind that hurts precisely because it leaves no visible marks. And yet she remains there, calm, composed, without asking for explanations, without justifying herself. It is at this moment that he enters the scene. The billionaire, confident, surrounded by attention, treated as someone who is in charge of that space. His posture betrays power, money, and the certainty that the world works in his favor. Employees hurry, doors open, voices become softer when they speak to him. For someone like him, that private medical center is not just a place. It's familiar territory, almost an extension of his own ego. And when he crosses paths with the black woman, something in his gaze changes. There's a moment of bewilderment, followed by a quick, superficial judgment. To him, that woman doesn't fit into that setting. She doesn't match the luxury, the expensive silence, the status he believes he possesses. Without even needing to say anything yet, his expression already reveals his thought. What is she doing here? This is the kind of arrogance that arises when someone confuses money with human superiority. And perhaps you've already seen this happen before your very eyes. The woman notices. She always notices, because those who experience this type of situation learn to read environments, to anticipate disdain, to recognize when they are being underestimated. Even so, she doesn't back down. She doesn't lower her head. She doesn't change her posture to appear smaller or to ask permission to exist there. She simply waits. And this silence, which to many seems like weakness, carries something far more powerful than any impulsive response. As the seconds tick by, the atmosphere grows increasingly uncomfortable. The billionaire feels too comfortable. The reception remains hesitant. The space, which should be neutral and welcoming, transforms into a stage for everyday injustice, the kind that happens daily and is almost never questioned. But there's something different in the air. Small details that the attentive observer begins to notice. A manager's tense gaze, an employee who recognizes something too late, a silence that clashes with the billionaire's absolute confidence. What you're about to discover could turn everything upside down, because stories of humiliation don't always end as they begin. Sometimes, the most ignored person in the room is precisely the one who holds the most power. And it's exactly when nobody takes someone seriously that the truth prepares to emerge. Stay with me, because the next part of this story will reveal much more than a simple encounter at a private medical center. The silence that dominates that space is not empty, it weighs heavily. It speaks of times when someone was judged without being known, of doors that close before a word is even spoken, of stories that are almost never told because they happen far from the spotlight. And perhaps, as you observe every detail of this scene, something inside you is stirring. Perhaps you are remembering a moment when you too were ignored, discredited, or treated as invisible. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below about what has touched you most so far. Your experience matters more than you imagine. Meanwhile, the woman remains there, steadfast, seated or standing, it hardly matters. What matters is her presence, a presence that is unsettling because it doesn't ask permission. The billionaire, on the other hand, feels far too comfortable in that environment he believes he dominates. He smiles with superiority, exchanges quick words with employees, acts as if he has absolute certainty that nothing there can surprise him. But stories like this are never just about who speaks loudest. Often, they are about who observes in silence while everything unfolds in due time. And that's why this exchange between the storyteller and the listener is so important. When you like this video, you're not just clicking a button. You're saying that stories like this need to continue being told, that subtle injustices also deserve attention, that reverse humiliation and poetic justice have a real impact on people's lives. Each, helps this content reach someone who might be going through exactly this right now, somewhere. If you feel that this type of story represents you, provokes you, or makes you reflect, subscribing to the channel is a way to walk this path together. Here, each story, each social upheaval, each moment of revealed authority exists because there is a community that believes in the power of these narratives. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this type of content. People who need to hear that appearance doesn't define value, and silence doesn't mean absence of strength. And while this private medical center continues to operate under invisible rules of status and appearance, something begins to change behind the scenes. Small gestures, uneasy glances, a growing unease where before there was only certainty. Nothing has yet been said aloud, but those who pay attention feel it. The story hasn't even reached its most intense point, because when the truth begins to approach, it doesn't warn. It simply enters the room and changes everything around it. The first comment comes across almost as a poorly disguised joke, a crooked smile, a laugh too short to be cordial, too long to be ignored. The billionaire looks her up and down, not with curiosity, but with that quick assessment of someone who believes they know exactly who they're dealing with. His voice carries irony, a tone of false politeness dripping with contempt. He asks if she's in the right place, if there hasn't been some mistake, if that private medical center was really the destination she was looking for. There are no shouts, no direct insults, and perhaps that's what makes it all the more heavy. Because humiliation, when wrapped in laughter and harmless comments, often goes unnoticed by those who have never had to acknowledge it. But those who have experienced it know. They know how to identify the gaze that measures worth, the question that doesn't seek an answer, only reaffirms an invisible hierarchy. And at that moment, judging by appearance ceases to be just a feeling and transforms into action. He doesn't believe she belongs in that environment. He doesn't believe she has authority, influence, or any relevance there. In his mind, everything seems very simple. The reception area observes in silence. Some employees pretend not to hear. Others smile awkwardly as if it were just another uncomfortable situation that needs to be swallowed to keep their jobs. And the black woman is there, at the center of it all, being questioned not for what she said or did, but for what she appears to be. It is at this point that the emotional tension truly sets in, because the viewer realizes that this is not a common misunderstanding. It is a clear demonstration of mentality, of how decisions are made based on stereotypes, not on facts. The billionaire continues. He laughs at something only he finds funny. He comments on schedules, on the important people who frequent the place, on how that type of clinic demands a certain standard. Each sentence carries the same hidden message. You don't fit in. You shouldn't be here. You're occupying a space that, in his view, belongs to another type of person. And perhaps you've heard something similar before, even if in a different context, with different words, but with the same silent impact. The woman listens to everything, and this detail completely changes the scene. She doesn't interrupt, doesn't argue back, doesn't try to prove anything at that moment. Her expression is not one of fear, nor of submission. It's that of someone who understands exactly what is happening, of someone who has already traveled a long journey to get there and knows that some truths are only revealed when the other goes too far. The contrast between his laughter and her silence creates an almost physical discomfort, because the more comfortable he feels humiliating her, the more evident becomes the fragility of the power he believes he possesses. Judging by appearances always carries a trap. It creates a false sense of control, as if it were possible to define someone's entire story in a few seconds. The billionaire acts as if he is above any questioning, as if money has given him access not only to exclusive spaces, but also the right to decide who deserves respect. But decisions made at this level of arrogance often ignore something essential, the hidden truth that is not apparent at first glance. And while he laughs, something behind the scenes begins to stir. An employee avoids his gaze. A manager hesitates before approaching. Small signs that this scene is being observed by more attentive eyes than he imagines. The transformation of the environment is subtle, almost imperceptible to someone too busy showing off. But for those paying attention, there is a clear change in the energy of the place, as if that attitude were about to generate a much greater impact than he calculates. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because this kind of humiliation doesn't happen by chance. It reveals patterns, reveals mindsets, reveals how misinterpreted power often blinds people at the very moment they should see most clearly. His laughter isn't just laughter, it's an attempt to reaffirm dominance. And her silence isn't passivity, it's strategy. It's someone who understands that some revelations only have power when they emerge at the right time, in the right place, in front of the right people. The atmosphere thickens. The discomfort is no longer just hers, nor just that of the viewers. It begins to spread throughout the environment, as if that private medical center, once so safe and controlled, were about to witness something that completely deviates from the expected script. Because when someone goes too far in judgment, it usually opens the door for an equally intense fall. And it is precisely at this point in the story that the masks begin to crack, even if they haven't completely fallen off yet. Comment below. This makes sense to me. She could have reacted. She could have raised her voice, demanded respect, exposed his arrogance right there. No one would have found it strange if that had happened. On the contrary, many would have expected exactly that response, but she does none of that. What she does is even more disconcerting. She remains silent. A firm, conscious silence, born not of fear but of control. Her eyes follow every movement around her, every exaggerated gesture of the billionaire, every attempt he makes to reaffirm a superiority that slowly begins to sound forced. This silence is not empty. It is laden with history, with a journey, with decisions made long before that encounter. It is the silence of someone who has learned that not every battle needs to be fought on the same level. While he talks too much, she observes. While he laughs, she notices, and this difference changes everything, because little by little, the atmosphere begins to react to this unexpected posture. The absence of direct confrontation creates an even greater tension, as if something were being held back just below the surface. The employees begin to show nervousness. One of them adjusts his posture repeatedly, another avoids the billionaire's gaze, as if too uncomfortable to endure the scene. What once seemed normal now sounds out of place. The billionaire's laughter loses its force. His words no longer find the same silent validation. It's as if the space itself begins to question his attitude. And all this happens without the woman saying almost anything. She answers only what is necessary, short, polite sentences, without extra explanations. She doesn't try to justify herself. She doesn't give details. This economy of words confuses those accustomed to dominating environments with volume and presence. The billionaire doesn't know how to deal with this. He expected resistance or submission, but finds something different, someone who seems too comfortable to be humiliated, and that disconcerts him more than any open discussion. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, small gears begin to turn. A director appears in the hallway, observes the scene from afar, frowns. A phone rings in the reception area, and the receptionist answers too quickly, with a more serious tone than before. There's a brief whisper, a name mentioned in a low voice, a glance that meets another. Nothing is said clearly, but everything begins to point to a hidden truth that has not yet come to light. The audience feels it. Something big is approaching. This is the moment when the narrative deepens, because her strategic silence is not merely a personal choice. It reveals a different mindset, a way of perceiving power and authority that doesn't depend on applause or intimidation. It's the kind of stance that only someone who has undergone an internal transformation can sustain. Someone who understands that some revelations need space to happen and that the true impact comes when the other person has already gone too far to retreat with dignity. The billionaire begins to realize that something isn't going as planned. He looks around, notices subtle changes in people's behavior, senses the atmosphere spiraling out of control. His confidence gives way to a slight unease. He talks more, tries to regain the center of attention, but it's no longer the same. The atmosphere no longer responds in the same way, and without realizing it, he begins to expose himself. Each ironic comment now weighs more heavily. Each laugh sounds out of place. Each attempt at humiliation builds, brick by brick, the stage for his own downfall. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because it is precisely in this silent interval that the most powerful stories unfold. Between humiliation and turning point lies a delicate space where decisions are made, truths come closer, and the impact begins to take shape. It is there that her emotional control becomes the stark contrast to his instability, and it is there that the viewer begins to suspect, with increasing clarity, that this woman is not there by chance. The staff's gazes now turn to her with a different kind of attention, no longer judgment, but curiosity. Who is she? Why is she so calm? Why doesn't she react as expected? These questions hang in the air, even if no one asks them aloud, and the longer her silence persists, the stronger these doubts become. The private medical center, once a stage for subtle exclusion, is beginning to transform into the setting for something much bigger, something that is about to redefine positions. Nothing has been officially revealed yet. No title has been mentioned. No authority has been announced. But the feeling is clear. There is a truth waiting for the right moment to appear, and when that happens, there is no going back. The strategic silence has served its purpose. It has created space, exposed mindsets, laid bare misguided decisions, and prepared the ground for a turnaround that will not only be surprising, but inevitable. Write this down. I'm on this journey too. The moment of revelation doesn't arrive with fanfare. There's no dramatic music, no solemn announcement. It emerges almost discreetly, as the most impactful truths often do. A director finally approaches, his expression too serious for an environment that, minutes before, seemed just another space of luxury and routine. He doesn't look at the billionaire first. His gaze goes directly to her, and that detail in itself changes everything. The air seems to grow heavier, as if the space itself understands that something irreversible is about to happen. The billionaire notices. He senses the change even before understanding the reason. The smile slowly fades. His posture adjusts. His eyes follow that interaction that wasn't in his script. There's a second of confusion, followed by an awkward, almost embarrassing silence. The director speaks softly, respectfully, using a tone that doesn't match how she had been treated until then. A title is mentioned, a function, a responsibility that carries real weight, and at that exact moment, the hidden truth ceases to be mere suspicion and becomes fact. She's not just any visitor. She's not there by chance. She's the CEO of the clinic chain, the ultimate authority in that place. The person who makes decisions, sets directions, establishes standards. Everything the billionaire believed he controlled simply changes hands, and the reaction is immediate. The atmosphere freezes, the employees hold their breath. The director remains composed, as if he knows there's no way to soften the impact. The billionaire tries to process the information, but his body reacts before his mind. His gaze loses firmness. His laughter disappears completely. This is the moment when power is silently yet absolutely reversed. There are no screams, no explicit revenge, no need for exaggerated exposure. Reality itself does the work. Every ironic comment made before now echoes differently. Each laugh takes on an almost unbearable weight. The billionaire understands, in a few seconds, that he didn't just humiliate the wrong person. He revealed his own mindset to the least suitable person for it. She remains calm, the same posture, the same control. The transformation isn't within her, it's around her. Employees who previously avoided eye contact now straighten up. The reception area changes its tone. The director awaits instructions. The private medical center ceases to be a stage for exclusion and becomes a setting for revelations. Everything happens quickly, but the impact is profound, because it's not just a social upheaval, it's a symbolic breakdown of hierarchies based on appearance, presumed status, and arrogance. The billionaire tries to say something, perhaps an apology, perhaps a hasty explanation. But the words seem too small in the face of what has been exposed. It's no longer about that specific moment. It's about decisions made automatically, judgments made without reflection, an entire journey built on the false idea of superiority. And this is clear in his gaze, a gaze that mixes embarrassment, fear, and the belated realization that certain attitudes cannot be undone. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because this revelation goes far beyond immediate shock. It reveals how true power rarely announces itself ahead of time. It reveals how emotional control can be more impactful than any impulsive reaction. Above all, it reveals how entire environments can be shaped by a single mindset, for good or for bad. The CEO doesn't need to exalt herself. She doesn't need to humiliate in return. Her presence says it all. Her authority manifests itself in how everyone around her adjusts their behavior in seconds. The medical center, which once seemed a rigid, almost hostile space, now reveals itself to be vulnerable. Vulnerable to its own flaws, its own silent prejudices, the misguided decisions that have been normalized over time. This is the part of the story that is rarely shown. The real impact of a revelation lies not only in the surprise, but in the internal consequences it provokes. Behind the scenes, contracts are recalled, internal policies come to light, and standards of conduct are reconsidered. The billionaire realizes there's no elegant way out. He's facing someone who doesn't need to prove anything, because they already are everything he tried to deny. And this understanding definitively changes the dynamics of the room. Silence returns, but now it's a different kind of silence, a silence of adjustment, of shock, of forced recognition. Nothing was officially closed, nothing was resolved there, but something was broken, and something new began to take shape in that instant. Write this down. This makes sense to me. What follows the revelation isn't noise, it's weight. A weight that falls upon someone who believed they were in control and suddenly realizes they orchestrated their own downfall with their own words. The billionaire remains there for a few seconds that seem far too long. The embarrassment doesn't need to be announced. It imposes itself. His body betrays what his mouth can no longer contain. Rigid shoulders, a gaze that avoids hers, an almost automatic attempt to reorganize the image that has just crumbled before everyone. There are no more laughs, no more irony. The space that once seemed too comfortable for him now feels cramped. It's as if the environment is reflecting back everything that was said minutes before, only unfiltered. The silence that settles in is not welcoming. It's a silence that exposes poor decisions, hasty judgments, a mentality that confuses financial power with human authority, and that hurts more than any sharp retort. He rehearses an apology. The words come out truncated, delayed, laden with that typical tone of someone who only realizes their mistake after the truth comes out. It's not exactly remorse. It's a belated realization of the consequences, the kind of apology born more from fear of loss than from awareness of the impact caused. And this is clear to everyone who observes, because when pride falls, it rarely falls silently. It makes noise inside. She listens, and again her posture redefines the scene. There is no need for revenge. There is no pleasure in seeing the other diminished. What exists is dignity, a quiet, mature dignity, built along a journey that did not begin that day. She responds with few words, objective, firm. She doesn't humiliate back. She doesn't use irony. She doesn't need to. The truth has already done the hardest work. True authority doesn't require spectacle. This is the part of the story that many people don't expect, because in narratives of reverse humiliation, one usually imagines a final explosion, a striking speech, a moment of verbal revenge. But here, the impact lies precisely in the absence of that. It lies in the conscious choice not to stoop to the same level. It lies in the understanding that some lessons are more profound when they don't need to be shouted. His embarrassment is already enough. The learning, if it comes, will need to be born from within. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because this scene goes beyond a meeting between two people. It reveals how pride often blinds, how decisions made based on appearances build invisible traps, how the hidden truth always finds a way to surface, sooner or later. The billionaire emerges from that interaction changed, not necessarily better, but impacted. He was forced to see something he may have avoided his entire life. That status does not replace character, and money does not buy discernment. Behind the scenes, the environment continues to transform. Employees exchange more attentive glances. A silent adjustment is taking place. Policies that once seemed merely formal now take on a different meaning. Small gestures begin to change. That woman's journey in that space doesn't end there, but that moment marks a turning point. Because when a truth comes to light in this way, it doesn't only affect those who directly erred. It reverberates. It teaches. It exposes patterns that were hidden beneath the routine. The final lesson isn't spoken aloud, but it becomes clear to those who follow the story attentively. Never judge someone by their appearance. Never assume authority based solely on what is visible. And above all, never underestimate the silence of those who know exactly who they are. Because true strength doesn't need to announce itself. It reveals itself at the right moment, with enough impact to reorganize everything around it. Nothing there is definitively closed. There are consequences that will still unfold, reflections that will still mature, decisions that will need to be reviewed. His pride was wounded, yes, but the story is not limited to that. It points to something bigger, deeper, more human, a silent invitation to a change of mindset, to a review of attitudes, to the understanding that respect is not optional, it is essential. And while the environment tries to return to normal, it becomes clear that normality no longer means the same thing. Something has been displaced. Something has been learned. Something has begun to transform there, even if no one has put it into words. Because when the truth appears, it doesn't ask permission to stay. It simply occupies the space that has always been its own. Comment below, "This makes sense to me." If you've made it this far, it's because this story resonated with you on some level, perhaps because of the situation itself, perhaps because of the reflection it provokes, perhaps because, at some point in your journey, you too have felt the weight of being judged before being known. And that's exactly why this space exists. If this type of content helps you see the world with more awareness, more sensitivity, and more clarity, subscribing to the channel is a simple way to continue walking together, following stories that are not just entertainment, but also learning experiences. If this message truly touched you, leave a comment saying, "This message was for me." It's a silent but powerful way of saying you were there until the end, and that this story found a place within you. And if throughout the video you felt a connection, reflection, or even a necessary discomfort, a like helps this content continue reaching people who might need to hear exactly this right now. And before you leave, there's a video here that complements this topic and further deepens this reflection on judgment, power, and truth. Click there and continue with me.